Hello guys, and welcome to Gary Grigsby's War in the Pacific. This is probably the most in-depth war game centered around the Pacific theater of World War II. I doubt you can find a strategy game more in-depth than this one. Then again, I am new to this game and this genre, so maybe I'm wrong, but I certainly haven't seen anything more in-depth, nothing that even comes close. This game is a simulation of World War II where two players can fight, one playing as Japan, one playing as all of the Allies, which is what I will be doing, playing as all of the Allies, duking it out with a turn-based system that goes by day, every turn being 1 day, and every turn taking hours, really, to set up. This first turn I'm going to show you took me about 40 hours to do, albeit a lot of that was spent learning the game and making a bunch of stupid mistakes. This game simulates down to the individual airframe. For Japan, down to the individual aircraft part, like the engine, as you have to make them and piece them together. For the Allies, you kind of just get stuff handed to you, which takes away your control of what you can build, but at least, it's kind of simpler. But that being said, the simulation is still very deep. It simulates down to the individual infantry squad, the individual mortar and artillery piece, I believe. Every single historical ship that was in the Pacific theater is here. Every group. Some of them are redone out of historical accuracy for convenience in order to stop the player from being overwhelmed by having too many little units. Some of them are combined into bigger ones in the case of the US. But other than that, this is a very deep game, and let me just give you a little look around the map. We have the US West Coast, as well as Canada and Alaska over here. You can get to other places that aren't included on the map with these little off-map hexes if you are playing as the Allies anyway. You have Canada, just the base Canada. I guess this is just supposed to be some eastern base. You have London, which they just call the United Kingdom. Down here we have Panama, so we can cross from east to west. We have Port Stanley this is the Falklands. We have New Zealand. We have all of Australia here. We have all these Pacific islands to worry about. The Dutch East Indies. Of course, this is going to be one of the most important points of the whole war, theoretically. The Malaysian Peninsula, Indochina, Burma, India's all here. We have China, of course, Japan, Soviet Union. We go up to the top, we have the Middle East represented up here. And I have a map mod, by the way, which is making everything look a lot better than it does. Because do note, this game's from 2004. It does not look this good. This is a mod. The mod breaks the location of the Middle East ones. Like, this is supposed to be up here. This is supposed to be up here. But we're not going to worry about that. We have Mombasa and Cape Town representing Africa. And Cape Town being probably one of the most important hexes on the western side of the map. And I believe that's everything. We have some little information up here placed on the map. Kind of weird if you're not used to these kinds of games that this is just on the game map, as well as just the title screen right here in case you wonder what this is. Do note I am playing at 1600 by 900. It took some finagling to make the game work on my system because my system is so new. So this is not a true 1080p. I'm scaling it so that it looks 1080p to you, but we don't get the exact same amount of screen space. Now to talk to you about the goals of this playthrough, well, the game ends in 1946, if you make it that long. The earliest it can end is the end of 1942, the start of 1943. And the way that works is, you see here, there's victory points. These are victory points here. We have a lot more than Japan. Pearl Harbor hasn't happened yet. But the Japanese have some good bonuses in the first 6 months of the war, and the Allies really just suck until you get to 1943-44, mainly. As is historically accurate. You could do some finagling to try to outperform history, and that's what we're going to try to do here. Now, to win the game, ideally, you need more victory points than the other person. There are some other variables at play, like if you make it to the end date of the campaign, since the Japanese lasted longer than historically, then that moves 2 stages in their direction. There is a decisive victory, a marginal victory, a draw, decisive defeat, and marginal defeat. So let's say you got a decisive victory, which requires having a certain bit more victory points than your opponent. And if you're playing the Allies. If you got decisive victory, but you lasted to the very end of the campaign, then technically the best you can get is a draw, because it's rewarding the Japanese for lasting that long. As well, there are atomic bombs in this game. If you use more than 2, it also moves 1 stage in favor of the Japanese. Out of 5 stages, you see how that can affect things. So ideally, as the Allies, you do want to end it earlier than the end date. As the Japanese, you either want to last to the end date, or you want to definitely end it as soon as possible, because once you get past 1943, into 1944, the Allies start getting a lot of stuff, as they historically did. Dozens of carriers, so many naval ships coming from the US and the UK, it's ridiculous. And so many troops, especially from the US, being sent into the theater that the Japanese would just be hard-pressed to resist without an amazing early war performance. In order to win an early victory, we have to have, by the end of 1942, 4 times the victory points of the Japanese. Now, that's not very likely, given the fact that the Japanese get a bunch of bonuses and we are pretty nerfed at the start of the war. By the end of 1943, if we have 3 times their victory points, we can win. By the end of 1944 and the end of 1945, with 2 times their victory points, we can win. So you see, we have to aim for one of these early victories, or the best we're going to get here is a draw in 1946. The Soviet Union, as you see, is also part of the game, but they're not involved. If the AI is stupid, we are fighting AI, by the way, then he can activate the Soviets early. Otherwise, they will be activated on their historical entry into the war. Doesn't mean I can't do nothing, I guess, with them. I've already done some things, getting them resting and training, setting up certain air flights, but I can't move them around. I can't do very much, but for those that do know a lot about the game and may comment telling me to do something with them, I'm on it. Trust me, I'm already on it. Now, I will lead you through my whole first turn and a good chunk of what I've done, the important things, not every little detail, and then we are going to end turn, and we are going to watch the replay. We're going to watch our actions in effect and see Pearl Harbor, and see how Pearl Harbor actually goes with my changes, because I have changed some things. By default, the game does start with the historical Pearl Harbor, but I thought it would be fun to go a little ahistorical, start on December 7th, before Pearl Harbor happens, and see if I can prepare for it. Now, for the record, I don't know how long these turns are going to be. It's probably going to be different every single episode. This is probably going to be one of the longest turns of the entire game. But do note, if this ends up being an hour long, don't take that as a standard. It's going to be very variable. I'm not aiming for a certain amount of time with these episodes. I'm aiming for just getting a whole turn complete every episode, no matter how long or short it takes. Now, to start going over some of the things I've done, the Middle East, it's pretty simple. All I'm doing right now is loading some fuel off some tankers, because I do believe the Middle East, of course, gets some oil and fuel, representing, you know, how the British invaded Iran and had some control over the Middle East, and they sent fuel down here to help supply places like India. So I have 2 tankers up here, a tanker over here, and we are loading some fuel at the moment at these bases. Over in India, I can summarize a lot of what I'm doing. There's a lot of task forces here, a lot of naval task forces. I can click some of them to show you. None of what they're doing is very important. I'm mainly sending them to strongholds. My big strategy on the map right now, since we're going to be playing very defensively, is setting up strongholds and getting assets there. In the case of India, pretty much any and every ship that you see moving is actually going to a stronghold, like Karachi, Colombo over here in Ceylon, and Calcutta I have picked as my 3 strongholds over here. Ships are moving there. Very little is moving out. Now, there are some things moving out over here that I would like to show you. Let me see if I can find it. Here's one. There's an entire Indian, what is a brigade? It merges into something though, right? Oh no, it's just the brigade. Okay. There's an entire Indian brigade loaded up onto troop transports over here, escorted by a destroyer escort with some anti-submarine capability. This is, of course, very important if you know anything about World War II. By the way, I will try to explain everything I'm doing to the best of my ability. If you are new to this game or new to this and it interests you, feel free to ask me any questions you have in the comments, and I'll either answer them in a future episode or respond to you if I can, or maybe someone that knows a lot about the game can do the same in the comments. I'm sure I'll need some help. Again, I'm not an expert in this game by any means, but here's one thing I am doing moving out of India is I'm sending, and this was already set up by default. I didn't set this up, this was already set up by default, an entire Indian brigade out of Karachi, and their current destination how do I check that again? Here, Rangoon. So they're being shipped out to Burma, actually. I don't know if I'm going to let them land there. It can be kind of dangerous. You can see there's a massive Japanese presence in Indochina, and they are undoubtedly going to take over all of this stuff and head down to Malaysia, because historically, Malaysia fell. Historically, Burma fell. All this stuff fell. And we're going to have to try to cheat history here, realistically. But this is historically set to be on the way there right now. I may let it land, I may not. One very ahistorical thing, probably the most ahistorical thing I've done my entire first turn on this map, is located in India. So I'm moving a whole lot of troops around here, and it would take a lot of time to explain to you what every single one of them is doing. But, for example, we see these engineers are moving up to Delhi. That's because this is a fragment of an engineer force, and I'm actually trying to piece it together. I am sending units to certain strongholds in India that I'm setting up, but these are not strongholds by choice. For example, Delhi has a garrison requirement, as you can see, of 60 assault value. There's 72 there. So I'm sending troops all around the place. For example, this one is going to Rawalpindi in order to get to a town that has a railroad, so I can then send it somewhere later if I want to. I'm sending a whole bunch of different types of units in India to these garrison locations, small and important ones, maybe engineers, and I'm sending any units of value that I can get out of there once I free it up, and that'll take some time. Not all those orders are given. I know in Hyderabad, there is some good stuff here. This Indian brigade that I'm going to piece together here is going to be worth a lot. I may want to get this out of here. I am sending more troops down here, but like, look at the assault values on this. This is going to be worth like 200 plus assault value, this Indian division, when I piece it together, although as you see, it's going to take a while because the biggest part of it doesn't arrive for 206 days. All these examples I've just shown you, any unit I can spare outside of these garrisons in India, I'm putting on these rail lines, which you can see by the dark black lines here, or this gray line here. I believe one of these is a major railroad and one is a minor one, I believe. I don't know which one. I'm not sure. But I am sending troops by rail, which will take them several days just to pack onto the trains, mind you, and that's several turns. Remember, every turn in this game is only 1 day. So this series might go on for a while. I really don't know. If the game works out for me, I guess. I'm sending any troop I can spare down to Chittagong, which is a decent base. It has a good port. I don't know why I think I was just trying to get this to 5. I'm not using this as a main port. I'm actually moving all these. As you see, there's a bunch of transports, these AKs. If you're unfamiliar with these that you're seeing here, XAK, AMC, lowercase c, these are all like real military designations. The game does change some of the real life ships to different designations for gameplay purposes, but for the most part, this is accurate. AKs are pretty much cargo ships. AKLs are like mini cargo ships. This is a coastal minesweeper, this AM lowercase c. And it's going to just be escorting them, for what it's worth, over to Calcutta, because I'm going to use Calcutta as my main port over here, which may be silly because, I mean, it doesn't have as much port capability as Chittagong. As you see here, this 5 in parentheses means this is the natural max limit here. In Calcutta, the natural max limit is 3. So we're already at 5, you see the issue there. It's a lot harder to build up, but there is at least a shipyard here, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Initially, I wasn't going to really leave anything or anyone at Calcutta, but like I said, I am railing any troop I can spare over to Chittagong. This is where the railway ends. This is where it ends. So they're railing here, and they're going to get off here. I'm going to build up a bunch of them, and then I'm going to send them down. You see these yellow lines? This is a roadway. I can also show you the roadways like this. I'm going to send them down here. I'm going to have them cross the river into Burma. It shouldn't actually take that long thanks to the roads. Bring them down to Prom, maybe into Rangoon. But basically, I intend to ahistorically take every Indian unit that is free and not needed for a garrison that I can and send them into Burma to try to make some ahistorical stand in Burma. Is this smart? I don't know. It's going to take days just to get to Chittagong for most of these troops. Therefore, I have all the time in the world to change my mind. Now, typically, in this game, if you want to send someone somewhere, you need to do something special. Let me show you on this force I've shown you going to Rangoon anyway, this Indian Brigade. As you see, this Indian Brigade is attached to the Burma Command. That is a headquarters. And let me select someone in Burma to show you. Burma Command. This is a free headquarters under a higher free headquarters. When you're in a free headquarters, it means you can load onto a boat, you can take a plane, and you can go to any other theater of the war. Now, if we go back to India, and we look at, there's a fortress, let me pick someone else. So right here, Eastern Command R, this Assam Rifles Battalion. This has an R, that means it's in a restricted headquarters. What this means is I cannot load it onto boats, I cannot load it onto planes, even if I'm bringing it to somewhere else in the same theater, somewhere else that belongs to the same headquarters. Typically, I would have to pay to reassign it. For example, like I'd have to reassign it up to, well, anything really. Pacific Theater, South Pacific, North Pacific, China Command, Soviet Far East Command, these kinds of things. Ideally, you want it in a headquarters that it is close to, and that's the point of having these smaller headquarters under a larger one, like this India Command. Eastern Command is under India Command, because there are multiple headquarter units spread throughout the map that give you bonuses and other efficiency things. It's a lot harder to manage, honestly, as the Allies, since you have to worry about so much more of the map. But when you're in a restricted headquarters, like I said, you can't load on planes, you can't load on ships. However, there is nothing stopping you from going wherever you can get by land. This is a pretty big deal, because that means by India, every restricted Indian unit can get into Burma by crossing the river, can get to Indochina, Malaysia, China itself, all the way to Korea. That's a big deal, as I'm sure you can understand, because that means I don't need to reassign them. I can't simply reassign them, you might be wondering if you're new to this, because you need political points in order to change. I think it's supposed to be cheaper when you're changing within the same command, maybe not for every unit, but you see these are grayed out because I cannot afford to do it. I think you start the game with 100 political points, but at the moment I have 30, as you can see right here. I've already spent a lot of my political points this turn. I think I get something like 50 a day. I also get more with a whole nother system called withdrawal. So let me show you how this works. So we go to ground withdrawal, for example. You see, as the Allies anyway, there are moments where you need to withdraw your units from the map. This is the case for ground units, as I'm showing you here. Ignore these convoys, this is like the first one. He has to withdraw in 145 days. Withdraw means he's literally going to leave the map and leave the game. He may return later, they may give me an updated one, but he will disappear eventually. And I think for ground units, they just do it automatically. They just disappear when the timer runs out, and then maybe they'll come back later. Again, as the Allies, you get given most of your troops, and the withdrawal is to simulate troops being recalled to go fight against Germany. There's a war happening in Europe. We're not isolated, and we suffer the consequences of it. You can turn this off, but I'm going to leave it on for historical accuracy purposes and for the balance of the game. This also happens to ships, as we can see. Withdrawals. Let me get up here. Yes, so we can see there's some withdrawals. I could set it by days, actually. 57 days is the soonest we have to withdraw any ship. There's an AP here, a troop transport, withdraws in 79 days. These have to be sent to very specific ports in order to withdraw, so that's kind of like a big deal. I have to be ready to withdraw them. You can see this one actually has a return date in 1944, yeah. Make sure I'm reading that right. It will return. Sometimes they return as something different, sometimes they return as the same thing, but it's leaving to Europe, basically, for a few years, and it'll be back in 44, but we have it for the next 79 days anyway. The same thing happens with planes. We can see days to withdraw, yeah. There was one due to withdraw in 12 days, and when you get close enough to a unit's withdrawal date, at least for air, maybe for ships, you can actually withdraw them early. And when you do withdraw them early, you get political points as like a reward, like good job, you did it. And for things other than ground that don't withdraw automatically, if you choose to keep them beyond their withdrawal date, which you can, you actually suffer a penalty to your political point income as a result of it. And this is to simulate the whole, you're in control of the theater, but there's demands made of you. If you do things faster than expected, you get rewarded, you get some political favors, curry some renown. And if you choose to kind of extend your limits, you can actually lose political points and lose leeway in making these kinds of decisions. Well, to reassign these units to other divisions, HQs where I can make use of them, I need to pay these political points. And at the beginning of the war, I'm going to be very restricted in my usage of it. And that is to simulate the fact that the Allies put the priority on Germany. They were not really ready to fight in the Pacific until 43, 44 especially. So we're going to be really stressed at the beginning of this game. It's going to be difficult to get by, and we're not going to be able to go on major offensives. That's why I'm trying to be cheesy here and go really ahistorical, send as many Indian units as I can to Burma to try to ahistorically hold it somehow, if possible. If it doesn't work out, I can always send them back. It wouldn't be too hard to send them back unless they get cut off somehow, but I do think with how much I'm sending there, I could maybe make a difference. To look at some other stuff I'm doing, again, just kind of moving things around. I have all these engineer groups over here, and some infantry groups that need to be remade into their fuller parts, like another Indian brigade over here on Ceylon, a Ceylon base force engineer unit that needs to be pieced together. Around Colombo, around Colombo, yes, in Ceylon, I'm sending to Colombo, gathering them there, piecing them together. I do have some amount of transporting supplies happening as well. Like we have a convoy here loading supplies at Colombo. I don't even remember making this. Again, I worked on this turn for a while, like 40 hours. This is sending supplies to Port Blair, which historically fell, but I do want to try to hold it if I can. I don't have a lot I can send there. I have been tempted to maybe send that Indian brigade or something over here to hold it. I'm not sure yet. There is also a British division over here being transported historically. It's currently in brigades, but it's part of the 18th British Division, and the whole force is loaded up on transports here. It was headed to Rangoon, so to Burma, by default. At the moment, for lack of a better idea of what to do with it, I actually have it sent right now to Oosthaven in the Dutch East Indies, because I want to try to get it down here to maybe hold Palembang, which is, I believe, the second highest oil producing facility on the entire map. And as the Allies, I don't need this. Ooh, I accidentally hit a button. I don't need this as the Allies. Japan needs it. Japan needs it to fuel their economy. They're desperate for oil. That's why historically they invaded the Dutch East Indies. That's why Pearl Harbor happened. To this day, the only major power of any kind to actually invade another country, let alone several, for oil, is Japan. They committed Pearl Harbor so that the U.S. wouldn't be able to stop them. They invaded the Dutch East Indies, took it over, took all that sweet, delicious oil, and used it to fuel their war machine. Well, I hope to maybe hold Palembang based on the amount of oil it has. I do plan on moving a lot of the troops here over there, but they're just weak Dutch troops. On Java, I have Batavia and so are Baja that I'm using as similar fortresses. So not as strong because I'm splitting them in two, but that's what I hope to do. It's probably not going to hold either way. At the moment, I have this British division that I just told you about set to go to Palembang because I figure it might help. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it that way. I may change it. I may still just decide in this to change it. What the hell am I looking at here? British Brigade. Is this more than just a division? Wait a minute. Is this more than just a division? 54th British Brigade. Okay, no, I think it's just going to reform. 54th, yeah, okay, I see. So it's all going to form into this British division, which is going to have, by the looks of it, several hundred assault values. So wherever I choose to send this, it's going to be a pretty big deal. If I send it to Palembang, that'll probably hold Palembang. Then again, I could send it to Port Blair, where I do know I want to try to hold it. Now, Port Blair is not nearly as valuable. It's not nearly as important, which is why I'm probably not going to send it to Port Blair. Several hundred AV, that needs to be defending Palembang, because the Dutch troops aren't going to amount to nearly as much. Look at their assault values, 38. We're talking almost nothing over here is in the hundreds. A British division in Palembang can really hold on to that for us. I might need to send more there, even. I figure maybe I can unlock some Indian units or some other British or Australian units that come in later war in the Middle East or in Cape Town and send them to Port Blair if I really want to, if I really need to. But again, that's a big what if. This is not an important base. Strategically positioned, it is important. It's a good place for seaplanes. It's a good refueling point. But if you look at this little hover thing, you can see the value to Japan, value to allies. It's not worth a lot. It's worth 8 victory points to the Japanese and 4 to us, as opposed to Singapore, for example, which is worth 1,890 to us, 420 to Japan, which means if they take this, we lose 1,890 victory points, and they get 420 just by holding it. And you can trade this back and forth. Palembang, similarly, is not actually worth a lot, but the amount of refineries and oil it has makes it worth a lot. Oh yeah, here's another reason I'm sending all these troops to Colombo. Colombo has a garrison requirement of 40. It only starts out with 10 there. So I definitely need to get more troops here. When you don't meet your garrison requirements, I don't know all the effects it has. I do know that if you don't meet them, though, you start to lose victory points. Now, I don't know if that comes out of the value of the base, and then it comes back over time if you meet your garrison requirement, or if it's a permanent, like, -1 to some of your victory points. I'm assuming it's a permanent -1 and you don't get it back. So ideally, I want to meet my garrison requirements everywhere that I can. Moving over to the Dutch East Indies, I've told you what I'm doing in Sumatra with Palembang. Right now, I do have some troops headed to Medan to meet up and form their full forces. I believe an infantry and an engineer unit. Once that's done, I'll probably march it down to Palembang as well. Java, I've already told you. Borneo, I can't do much with, but I am using it as kind of a... In the middle point, I'm using Balikpapan. Balikpapan, I believe that's how you say that. Correct me, by the way, if I get that wrong, ever. In order to gather up some planes, gather up some forces, and send them down to mainly Java or Australia. I'm going to be using Australia as quite a important base for me here. So this is not going to be very important. It's going to fall. I don't think I can protect this. Not even Balikpapan. I certainly don't believe that I can protect this. I'm building fortifications anywhere that I plan to hold out, because evacuating these troops, for example, would cost points for every single one of them. Look at this one. Costs 103 points to change. At least to change it to a different command. It looks like I can get this to Far East Command, to Abda Command, for less. It doesn't tell me how much, but I believe that it's less because I'm able to select it. Don't know if that's true or not. Maybe someone could tell me in the comments. I don't know. Yeah, that's true. There's also these troops down here. I do wonder how much that's going to cost. I do plan on changing these guys, so maybe I could test that right now. There are some engineer base forces on some of these islands. They belong to the Timor Base Force, which I guess is historical. And they're located on islands spread around here. In order to board any of these guys onto their ships, and I am sending ships to go get them and bring them to Kopang. I'm sending everything on Timor to Kopang to make that my little stronghold. I believe I'm sending supplies over there too. I will need to get them out of this command. So I know, yeah, this is going to cost 4 points to change, it says, to anywhere else because it's such a tiny group. And I'm curious. So it's 4 points to change. What happens if I change it to Far East Command Abda? Let's test that right now. Alright, I changed it, and it only cost 1. Oh, okay. So it looks like it's not telling me the value, but it definitely is still cheaper to change it within its own force. So let me go ahead and do that right now. Let me get all these things over to Abda, these engineers that I plan on picking up. I don't believe there was anything else over here. I believe it was just these two. Yes. I do think I planned on picking this infantry unit up as well. As you see, this costs 49 points to change. Clearly, it's going to cost less here, but it looks like we can afford it. That's good to know. So it is cheaper than I thought to evacuate something within its own theater, if the overall theater allows you to do that. For example, Australia doesn't let you do that. Australia Command is restricted. And Australia Command's not under anything. It's the overall, like the highest headquarters. So I can't cheese Australians. Maybe I can by getting to them to the Australian Corps, Eastern Command, you know, but I can't get them up. I don't know if it matters too much, but I guess that's a thing we have to keep an eye out for. I think New Zealand's basically the same. Let me take a peek. New Zealand Command R. Okay, yeah, New Zealand has nothing in it at all. That's unrestricted. So if I wanted to start deploying New Zealand troops elsewhere for whatever reason, then I would have to pay a lot of political points to completely change their theater, their HQ, out of New Zealand anything, probably into like the American Pacific Fleet or over into ABDA, for example. This helps me realize now that if I ever do want to change some Indian troops without it being that expensive, well, for one, Burma Command is within the same little headquarters group, but I can also just change any of them to Far East Command, to the ABDA headquarters, and maybe send some of them to Port Blair. I think that's what I might end up doing, unless I just happen to get any British or Australian or something other units that are already unrestricted to send, which I will. We will get more troops. Let me just give you a peek at that. As you see, days until arrival. These are airframes. Wait a minute. Ground units. Days until arrival. 2 days we get a bunch of base forces from the U.S. We have a long list of things that we're going to get throughout the war here, as you can see. You can also see where they arrive. Things arriving to Aden are going to be definitely of note if I want to send anything to Port Blair, because anything arriving in Aden or Colombo or Cape Town would be pretty useful. Anything arriving in Aden or Abadan or Colombo or Mombasa would probably be the most useful, because their headquarters will probably already be unrestricted, because the game probably wouldn't expect me to keep them off map. So that's probably what I'll do for Port Blair. Yeah, just because it's not as important, that's definitely, yeah, I think that's what I'll do. I'll wait till I get something off map that comes in new, not already there. There's not a lot there right now, just some base forts and some engineers that are locked there. But I'll wait for reinforcements there, and then I can send them out. Got an HQ over here. Yeah, nothing usable. We will get stuff. It will come in. Maybe in a future episode, I'll look over what we're going to get soon, every episode anyway. As of right now, we're going to get stuff, yeah, but with Pearl Harbor not even happening yet, most of what we're getting is just like some ships in Pearl Harbor, which is really weird. In terms of ships and planes, basically all over the map, I am just moving ships and planes around to places where I need them, where I might need them. For example, here I have patrol craft, AVP, cargo ship headed down to Darwin. Over here I actually have an AVP headed up to Manila, and we'll go over that in a bit. And I am sending planes typically from around this area down south. I've already evacuated a full group of B-17D fortresses out of the Philippines and sent them down to Darwin. Okay, there's no cheaper way to do that. I have to pay the full cost of getting them into another theater, which sucks because they're like 30-something a pop, these B-17D groups. So I've been transporting them from up here to down here, and then I sent one south to Darwin. It was the only one I could really afford to do right now. Over in Celebes, not very well defended. There's like some base forces here, and I could unite them in Makassar. Makassar? Yeah, I guess that's how you say it. But, or any of these locations actually. Do they actually have a name? The Celebes base force. Yeah, I'm probably not going to do that though, because I can't defend Celebes. Japan will take it over, and no amount of moving units is going to help unless I use ships, because there's no roadways connecting the island. It's going to take too long anyway. I'm just going to leave them where they are and call it a day. Now for the Philippines. The Philippines is going to be attacked. It will be attacked, and it will probably fall. I am choosing another stronghold strategy here. There's a lot of stuff here that I just can't move because it's permanently restricted, or it's restricted in general and it's not worth the points. So these islands are all screwed right here. Puerto Princesa I'd love to hold if I can. I'm not going to send any troops there, but it's a good place for seaplanes. I think I have 2 groups of seaplanes over here now. I'm putting as much as I possibly can over in Manila, and this has made a problem in actually 2 locations on the map, Manila and Singapore. I have too many planes and not enough aviation support, so that's not going to be good. Some of my planes may end up in the reserves because of it. They may not get repaired if they get damaged, not in time anyway, which sucks. But I am moving a lot of engineer forces. I'm moving AVPs to Manila and to Singapore. AVPs are patrol plane tenders, basically. They help add to the aviation support that a place has. Like, for example, this has 71 plus 34. That's coming from the AVPs, the AVDs, and the AVs in general that are in the port. A lot of this is actually going to be leaving because the USS Langley is here, which is the converted version of the US's first ever aircraft carrier. It's now just a seaplane tender, but it's here, and I'm leaving with it. I'm bringing it with me. I'm not letting it stay here for entirely almost sentimental purposes, but also because it's worth 19 victory points, and it can carry 4 planes by itself. So I'd rather send it down to Darwin, where it could be a little more useful, and then I'm sending some AVPs, maybe some AVDs up as well to take its place. Things that add up to a lot less, I'll tell you that much. I have some planes up on these northern bases that are transferring down from Hong Kong. They didn't have the range to get any further. I didn't check if they had drop tanks. I don't think they did, but they're just running away from Hong Kong. This one had an accident. There's a damaged aircraft here. I'm probably not going to get it out of here, unfortunately, because it's damaged and I don't have engineers over here. So that one's probably dead. By the way, I have lost a few planes. I think I've lost 3 planes just transferring planes around, because that happens back in this day. You have, some pilots crash on landing. Sometimes a landing gear fails. Anything could happen. I've moved around hundreds of planes this first turn, and as a result, I've lost 1 B-17D Fortress, 1 Blenheim IF, and 1, I think this is a recon plane, I'm not sure. Nothing to worry about, because the AI will have the same problems if he moves planes around. I think we can basically write off this 1 walrus we saw, a float plane. Float planes, that's really good. I need more float planes, actually. Very short range float planes, though, which sucks, but maybe I can get them somewhere, make some use of them. I have a lot of islands that could use float planes for naval search and anti-submarine warfare purposes. But generally, everything in the northern part of the Philippines, I don't know the name of the island, I'm sending to Manila. I'm going to build up in Manila as much as I can, trying to get the port and airfield up so that we can have unlimited supplies. I'm drawing, as you can see, as many supplies as I can to Manila. I'm going to build the forts, obviously, as much as I can, and I'm just going to try to sit on this. I'm going to try to hold it. That's semi-defensible terrain. It is UI, and UI means Urban Light. It has a 2 times defensive bonus. I believe that Bataan or Clark Field, IG and something like IR or JR. JR is Jungle Rough times 3, or JG is 2. Yeah, so Clark Field is more defensible in terms of terrain. So maybe it would be smarter to do that. But here's why I'm not gonna. Look at Clark Field. It has a value of 36 to the Japanese, 450 to us. Look at Manila. 550 to the Japanese, 1,100 to us. It just seems so much more important and so much more valuable to me if I were to defend Manila and only Manila out of everything up here. I do expect the Philippines to fall eventually, but if I could hold them at Manila, it would be good. As well, because Clark Field doesn't have a port. Well, it can get one, apparently. Oh no, it does have one. It's not supposed to have one, but it does. A very small one. The port in Manila is actually a lot better, and it has a shipyard. I figure it would be easier to actually maybe sneak some supplies in and out of there if I possibly can. Like, I have some subs here. I'm not going to show you where all the subs are going, by the way. Just note, I have given orders to every sub in the game. They have orders. They're going to intercept Japanese shipping and hunt down certain Japanese task forces. There's a mission called Sub Transport. We can actually try to sneak supplies in there, or maybe even get cargo ships in there earlier on to bring supplies in. Also, Manila does produce some of its own supply. It has some resources, and it has light industry, which processes resources into supply. That's another reason I wanted to do Manila, because Clark Field does not produce any supply. Bataan does not produce any supply. So at least Manila will be semi-self-sufficient. I see all of this crap is connected as well. I have made sure to move these troops to the Manila as well. Hopefully we get there in time, Same thing in Malaysia, where I'm moving almost everything that I can to Singapore. The only places where I'm not moving everything is where certain things just cannot move, like these fortifications. We do have some planes that are stuck in some locations because they're being maintenance or they're damaged, but I'm going to try to get them out. I've already sent a bomber group from Singapore up to Rangoon because I didn't have enough aviation support for them in Singapore, so I'm trying to move things around for logistical purposes. Moving down into this part of the Dutch East Indies, into Australia, actually. I'm moving everything in Papua New Guinea over to Port Moresby, which is a historically very important base and strategically important as well. I'm building it up as much as I can. I'm not going to go over the soft caps here. I'm just getting them up so that I can try to fit more supply in here. Get it fortified. I'm going to form together like the Port Moresby Brigade if I can. I'm transporting troops from Rabaul and Kavang to different locations. Rabaul is actually worth a decent amount of VP to the Japanese, but I know for a fact that I cannot defend this. So I'm going to be getting as many of these things off of here as I can. I don't think I have anyone going to pick up the Rabaul detachment base force. I'd love to get them. I don't have anyone going over there yet. I could. Did I have planes here? No, I don't. I could send someone for them right now. Alright, so I've just put together another little task force, an XAP, and a patrol gunboat with some ASW value. And it's just going to mosey on its way from Brisbane. I know why I didn't do this earlier, is because I didn't have any more APs, troop transports, in the area. But I'll take one down from Brisbane. It's got to go further, so I'm sending it with a little escort to Rabaul, and I'm going to pick up this base force as well, because it has engineers and aviation support, and rather than just let that die on Rabaul, which it will die here if I don't take it away. Even if I left everything that's here, it will die. I'd much rather protect Port Moresby than this. And if I get that aviation support and engineers to Port Moresby, we can fortify it better and faster and fit more planes there. Aviation support and engineers they're very valuable in this game. You need engineers to build up bases. You need aviation support to maintain your planes. As you saw, I have many aviation problems in Manila and Singapore at the moment. China has no good amount of aviation support or engineers, so they have shortages of that stuff everywhere. I think the Japanese engineers are actually worse than all of the Allied engineers, so I imagine their problems are even worse than ours. There are some other infantry units somewhere around here. I believe, for example, the Lark Battalion here is part of a group that's actually a division where two of the brigades are actually in Malaysia, in Singapore. Rather than evacuate Singapore, well, they're going down to Singapore, they're not actually there. Rather than evacuate, I think I might actually send those 3 battalions that are missing, in addition to the 2 brigades that are already in Malaysia, to Singapore as reinforcements so I can form that Australian, I believe it was a division. Australian Brigade, yes, the 8th Australian Division, because that would be pretty powerful and may just help me hold on to Singapore. I am going to try to make a fortress out of Singapore. Of course, if Singapore doesn't fall, maybe Palembang won't fall, but I'm trying to set up different, groups, different things. And I do believe, I may be wrong, let me check, like the Gull Battalion, the Spower Battalion, yes, they're already under ABDA command, so I don't even have to pay to move them. So if I reinforce these places, at the very least, maybe I can do more damage with the full force to the Japanese troops, because when a ground troop dies, except in some cases, you don't get them back. If we can't form the division, we might as well have the division fight in a stronghold and take down as many Japanese as possible. That's my thought. Over in Hong Kong, I'm just evacuating everything. Anything that can go far is going to Darwin. Darwin I'm going to be using as a major hub. These motor torpedo boats, they don't have good fuel. I'm sending them to Manila, and they're going to go chill out there and refuel. Everything else is just sitting here. They're under Far East Command ABDA, so they can leave. Where are they going to go? I don't have troop transports here to bring them anywhere. If I did, there's so many Japanese planes and ships over here, they just get sunk probably anyway. At least some of them would. There's enough fortifications and etc. here. There's supplies. I can't do anything. I'm going to sit them here. Historically, these dudes sat here and they died. That includes a Indian brigade. That includes some Canadian battalions. How many? Two Canadian battalions, I guess? Yes. Rifles of Canada and the Winnipeg Grenadiers Battalion, and then a British engineer, a British battalion infantry unit, and then there's these forts. It's really not a lot of assault value, and they're probably just going to die. Not much I can do about it. I'm going to leave them there and let them die with the ship, deal as much damage as they can. China, I could sum up what I'm doing pretty easily. I have a lot of planes repairing because for whatever reason they start out being maintenance or damaged at the beginning, and not enough aviation support to even keep them running, unfortunately. The Tigers, what were they called? The Chinese Tigers? Where are they? Oh, they're here, actually. The Tigers. I forget their full name. Let me look it up. The Flying Tigers. They're called the Flying Tigers. Flying H-81s, which I believe is just a modified P-40 variant, I believe. I'm not sure. Someone can correct me. Are over here. One of them is in the 221st Group RAF, so it's actually in an open headquarters, so I might not actually even send this into China. It's in an open group under the India Command. I may just use this in Burma, quite frankly. These two are currently locked to China. I could send them to the China Command, right? And that would actually probably free them up. It'd be pretty cheap. Yeah, 13 points to change within command. You see, these ones actually tell me. Much cheaper. It'd be free. I could always change them out. But I may also want to send them into China because China's planes suck. They're terrible. They're awful. These are U.S. planes, however. They're U.S. air groups. And I don't know if the U.S. is producing any more H-81s. We could take a look. Aircraft replacement pool. Narrow it down to the U.S. Just the U.S. everything. Go to fighters. Are we making H-81s? No, dude, we're not. I know the Chinese are making H-81s. But I don't know if we can draw those replacements here. Oh, it looks like we can. Wait, maybe not. No. Yes. Chinese. Okay, so the Chinese are producing more and I can draw from them. I think what's happening is the US isn't even supposed to be able to have the H-81s in their air groups. This was just assigned by the developers. So that's how I can access this pool. Okay, so the Chinese are producing more of these. Maybe I should leave them in China. Don't know what I can do with them. The Chinese infantry, what I'm doing is very simple. They have a lot of headquarters in China and a lot of strong points. Right now, we literally slice a line through Japan, and we're probably going to get pushed back. Japan, as I've heard, is overpowered in China, which is why apparently many players play with the China theater turned off. What I'm doing is I'm sending a lot of the units to meet up with their respective headquarters nearby, like there's a headquarters here, the 7th Group Army. I'm sending everything in the 7th Group Army to meet up with it. That's essentially what I'm doing around all of China. So I can get some fortresses, some little mini power blocks that I can then use because right now, as you see, the China theater is a mess. It took me hours to give orders. There are some attacks that I am doing, though. This is not a quiet theater. For example, I have a whole bunch of troops, maybe more than one army, maybe just one army, attacking Yichang. We're moving to Yichang to attack it, and also Xinjiang. Now, Yichang is connected to us by road, so we can try to supply it. Supply in the China theater sucks. So long as the Burma road is open, then every day, like right here, if you can draw a line with the road, I don't know if these, okay, so if you could draw a line to Paoshan, I believe, then in Suyong, 500 supplies spawn every day free of charge. As well, you can also move supplies from Rangoon, from Burma, into these locations just naturally as supply moves through the rest of the game as well, because supply does follow the roads. Now, I don't know exactly how that works. Like, you can see the roads do go from this tile to this tile. The only reason it's not drawn is because there's a river. I don't know if that means that supplies will or will not move that way, but as it stands, supply will move through Pegu, up this line to Mandalay, to Lashio, also through Prom, up this back line here to Magui, even across to Shuebo, up here, and then down again. There's 2 paths leading into Paoshan right now that are open. That's another reason why I want to try to defend Burma if I can with Indian troops, to leave this open because the Chinese units really depend on it. I also plan on getting a whole bunch of fuel, like I pointed out in the beginning, from the Middle East. I'm going to send it to Karachi. Ooh, no, don't do that. And then we're going to process the fuel into supply, and then I'm probably going to take the supply from Calcutta and then send it down into Rangoon, overload Burma with supply, and then hopefully more of it will go into China. That's my hope. My other attack happening in China, of course, is Xinjiang. It is placed on this railroad, which we do own the top part of for now. We might lose it. I expect we will lose it. The Japanese, as I said, are very powerful in the China theater in this game. So we're going to try to take this to cut them off again. It would be so nice if we could connect the whole thing. So fucking nice, but I don't know that we have that power. Once our troops start reuniting with their respective HQs, I will look at seeing if we can do any attacks like that. Rather than push heavily in the center, though, I do have a goal of just making sure that in some way we cut the Japanese, off from connecting Indochina to Korea and the other part of China. So I do plan on trying to take Langsong eventually. They will probably take Pakoi away from me. I want to try to retake it eventually. And I have some groups kind of preparing for that. There's a HQ I have around here that I'm thinking about using. I think it's the 20th Group Army. I could be wrong. I believe that is the army that I have pegged for sending down. If I could take Canton and retake Hong Kong after it falls, also really amazing. Retaking Quang Chowan after it falls also could be amazing. These are goals that I have set for the China theater. Going on to Australia. So I picked strongholds here as well that I'm moving things to. Darwin is my northernmost base. There's not many options here. I had to use Darwin, really. There's no other choices. I'm sending some engineers over to Broome, and I'm going to kind of expand Broome as a backup Darwin. In case Darwin falls, I will send anything in Darwin that needs to escape over to Broome and operate out of there. I'm only sending engineers there right now. I'm not sending anyone or anything else. It's a backup. I'm just building it up as a backup. Especially because it's in a pretty good strategic location. Maybe I can start utilizing it later on. It is connected to a roadway. I was going to use Derby. Broome is actually worth more. Either way, these don't produce their own supply. So I just opted for Broome instead because it actually already had a level 3 airfield, whereas Derby did not, and their port capacities are literally the same. On the west, I'm gathering anything and everything I can at Perth. In fact, from Perth and Darwin, I'm going to be running tankers in and out of first Oosthaven, I imagine. I don't want to risk going to Palembang to suck fuel out of the Dutch East Indies so that the Japanese can not get as much. And Java, whenever Oosthaven becomes too dangerous, to bring them back to Australia to fuel the Australian economy, I guess, to produce supply. I'm not doing this with New Zealand. New Zealand I'm going to supply from the US. I'm actually draining a lot of supplies out of here in convoys. One is going to Pago Pago. The other is going to Tahiti. A very small amount of supply going to Tahiti, but a very large amount going to Pago Pago. Because I plan on using Pago Pago as kind of like a backup secondary air base to Fiji, of which we have a whole lot of US troops from Canton Island, a lot of engineers, and a lot of aviation support headed to Fiji to make this a giant Pacific air base. It's a very valuable base. The whole island is very valuable. But I am sending some supplies over to Pago Pago as a little secondary thing. I'm sending some troop transports out to fetch certain things like some New Zealand detachments that are spread out so I can move them somewhere else, realistically. They all have open HQs anyway, so I think I'm going to get them sent somewhere else. Maybe to Vavau and build this up as another New Zealand location as a backup. And then maybe get some US troops to reinforce Pago Pago. I don't know. I may just get all the detachments sent over to Pago Pago, but I'm thinking I might build Vavau up as well so I can have 3 good airbase locations and ports in this little triangle. Make my own Pacific triangle that the Japanese ships go missing in. From Australia, I'm already sending supplies to Nomaya to reinforce New Caledonia. I don't think I have any more troops headed there. It's a free French location. I'm also resupplying Port Moresby from Townsville. My other strongholds, by the way, in Australia are Townsville. I am using Rockhampton as a backup just because it's worth so much, so I'm not sending too much there. I'm building up Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, I think Queenstown or Hobart. I think Hobart. Yeah, I'm going to build up Hobart a little bit, and Adelaide, just because they're worth a lot and they have things like shipyards, some of them. Apparently I'm not building anything in Adelaide, which makes sense. There's no point to build a whole lot here. But I know I was moving stuff here. I might as well build some stuff. There's no need to expand this port. One more level of airbase, and we will actually have infinite supply capacity here when you have 10 value between your added value of port and airfield capacity. That actually means you now have no supply spoilage. You just have infinite supply capacity there, so maybe smart to get Adelaide up to that. I don't even know if Adelaide's going to be useful, but I am moving stuff there in the meantime. We have a lot more strongholds down here than anywhere else. I did figure it may be too much, but a lot of these locations are worth a lot of victory points. I wanted to protect the ones that are worth a lot, and that's why I did it this way. My strongholds in New Zealand are Christchurch and Auckland. I'm using Wellington as a backup. And I've already showed you a lot of the convoys that I'm moving around. I haven't shown you the actual convoys going to the Dutch East Indies and out of it, but do note that they are there. I'll be more specific in showing you them in the future turns when I don't have a fuck ton of stuff to go over. I'm trying to save all the ships in the Pacific, sending them to Australia and to New Zealand to get them out of harm's way. I have not set up convoys out of Pearl Harbor yet, or Hawaii, or America, because that's dangerous. Pearl Harbor is about to happen. I don't want to literally ask to get convoys sank. You know? I've transported some airplanes to some of these islands. I think some Catalinas I transported. Let me see. Yes, I transported these Catalinas, PBY-5s, from Pearl Harbor down to Christmas Island because I figured they'd serve more of a purpose there. Let's see. I have a lot of things in the U.S. Anything that I can realistically reassign that isn't permanently locked to the U.S., I have sent to San Francisco, which is where I'm going to make my main U.S. hub down here in San Francisco for sending things to Hawaii and sending things into the Pacific Theater after that. Canada didn't really play a big part in World War II, so I'm not building up much of any fortresses over there. They have barely any units that I can even mess with, and most of the messing with that I've done is just to turn things off, like replacements and upgrades so that these bases and the units in them don't drain supplies that could go to any units that I can get to the front line. I've done the same on the US mainland because these are just places I don't expect to get attacked. And even if they do, I'd want other forces to have the replacements and have the upgrades because that's what's going to be really, really short and what's going to hold us back for a while as well. There are some Canadian units that I could reassign, like the 13th Canadian Brigade, which I am putting together. There's also the... where is it? It's up here. The Rocky Mountain RGER Battalion. Ranger Battalion. These are, I believe, like the only units I can move, out of Canada from right now. Maybe I'll get more in the future, but I am planning on using them, even if historically they weren't used. I'm doing the same with a bunch of US troops. Of course, there's going to be plenty of US troops as opposed to Canadian troops. I'm sending them around Victoria and Vancouver in terms of Canada, just to leave them there so I know where they are. And the American units are all going to San Francisco. I'm moving some unmovable, unusable units around, like to San Diego. You know, I haven't looked a lot at San Diego, but I'm sending some around to kind of help defend where they can defend. I haven't gotten all of these units. I was literally just doing this now. It's something I kind of was too lazy to do, but I figured I could do it here at least because in Australia, there's not as much of a point to do it because Australia could still get attacked. The US is not very likely to be attacked. Anything here of value that I could move anywhere else, I am moving to San Francisco as it is, so I can forward deploy it and so we can invade Japan and stuff like that. I'm not going to do that with Alaska because Alaska could actually get attacked. I don't know what the AI is going to do. The AI actually kind of rolls a die and picks between one of 20 war plans, only 4 of which are historical. So who knows what we're going to get here, what the AI is going to do, what we're going up against. All I really have left to show you are some air groups that are doing things. So in the Philippines, I do have a bunch of fighters running like 100% escort, like 100% of them will be in the air, no breaks for the day, over Clark Field, because I do believe there was a historic raid on Clark Field. And I wanted to shoot down as many of them as I possibly can during that, using my knowledge of history. Wake Island, I believe, got raided as well. So I have now, there are some Wildcats that are kind of stuck here, just running full cap over the island. Yes, full cap over the island. I've set their altitudes as well. I've made sure to do that and set their ranges and their targets if I have a target for them. And they're just going to defend here from anyone that might raid it. Midway, I don't believe I have only float planes. I may want to do something with Midway in the future. It's an atoll. Or an atoll? Or is it not? Was that Wake Island? That was Wake Island. Okay. So Wake Island's the useless one. Maybe we could do someone with Midway later on, but now for Pearl Harbor. I am standing down everything in Pearl Harbor except the float planes and the fighters. Let me show you the fighters. Some of the fighters don't actually have any ready aircraft, so I stood those down. But the escort ones, as you can see, I have 100%. So that's 10 Mohawks, 10 Mohawks, 15 Warhawks, 12, 10, 11 Warhawks. Why are these all P-40Bs? Why are there no E's here? I don't know. 7 Warhawks, 10 Warhawks, 6 Wildcats. Not a whole lot of planes. But I do have them all set at some good respective altitudes. 100% cap over Pearl Harbor. I believe I have all their distances set correctly. Yep. And they're going to try to defend Pearl Harbor from the incoming Japanese First Air Fleet. We're not going to win. They're going to do damage to our ships. I can't really send the ships anywhere because I'm pretty sure Pearl Harbor is surrounded by submarines. We're probably safer just leaving them in Pearl Harbor itself and crossing our fingers. But hopefully, we can shoot down a lot of Japanese planes. Historically, I believe only 3 Japanese planes got shot down in all of Pearl Harbor. And I believe they were all zeros. Meaning if we shoot down more than some zeros, more than 3 zeros, I think we've done better than history. And if we lose less than 3 battleships, I think less than 2 maybe, in the long run after the attack of Pearl Harbor, we've done better than history. And that's my goal, to perform better than history. That's why I have all these things set the way I have them set. I do have the McFarland AVD running back to San Francisco. It was on its way to Pearl Harbor by default, but I feel like historically this ship might have sank if it actually went there because, you know, Kido Butai showing up. So I'm running it back to San Fran just for its own safety. I have submarines patrolling where I think the Kido Butai might show up. Like I said, I'm not going to show you all of the submarines. If you're wondering where the current U.S. carriers are, there's one group here. They're where they historically were, but I'm sending them south of Pearl Harbor, close enough to take part in something, maybe, if I decide I want them to take part in anything, but generally on their way back to San Francisco. There is a carrier over in San Diego, I believe. It's somewhere over here. It's also headed to San Francisco. And the only British carrier on map at the moment is the Hermes, which has some systems damage, but it's going to Colombo and I'm going to repair it there. It's just a light carrier. I am going to segregate probably the British and the American carriers because I do want the British carrier supporting my ahistorical push to defend Burma, or maybe pushing out from Burma. I think they could be handy for that maybe. And I want the US carriers doing whatever the US carriers choose to do. Maybe some British ones will spawn over here anyway. We might include them. I know at least one is going to arrive in Cristobal within the next year or 2 in-game. But I don't know what I'll do with that one yet. I'll figure it out when it gets here. And that's it. Yeah, basically. That's the whole first turn. That's me explaining the game mechanics to anyone that's new. That's my plans. This is such a long turn already. I think I'm actually going to end this episode here and do the replay of this turn separately. Now, like I said, the standard format for this is actually going to be doing the turn and the replay in the same thing. The first turn just has so much stuff going on, and Pearl Harbor is going to have so much fighting that to make this a little easier to digest and a little easier to produce, I think I'm going to separate Pearl Harbor itself and the turn leading up to Pearl Harbor into 2 separate videos. And then we'll get on format as I have explained it. But for now, I hope you guys have enjoyed what you've seen. I hope you liked what you've seen. I hope you want to see more of this because I would love to keep going and do this whole playthrough and then eventually do Japan as well. Maybe find someone, like a player, to go up against. That would be even more exciting, wouldn't it? But for now, this is what we'll be doing. This will be probably my main series on the channel for a period of time. So, thank you guys very much for watching this very lengthy introduction episode. I'll see you guys in Pearl Harbor.